And Hayes.
Thank you, Commissioner Hill. Firstly, one remark. I'm glad you clarified earlier that historic banking collapses are not just confined to southern Europe. I could take my own country as a classic example, or rather spectacular example of that in the last decade or so. So I think that's an important recognition. I have two questions for you, Commissioner Hill. Firstly, on TTIP. We saw with the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008 how interconnected is the financial market in the United States of America and in the EU. We know the level of traded financial services between both of our systems, and the fact is that we basically have two sets of rules right the way across financial services. What's your view on the potential for a financial chapter within TTIP, given the fact that we now have this latest round of talks? And would it be your view, would it be a sort of systemic failure in your view, were we not to come to some agreement on the necessity of a financial chapter as part of the TTIP round? And my second question relates to retail financial services. Can you clarify when you are going to bring forward a green paper on this issue? I know you've spoken about it in the past. The fact is that less than 3% of EU consumers avail of mortgage, credit card or insurance products in other member states. And this has been the Cinderella, if you like, of the European Commission for the past 2 decades. We do not have an internal market. So what is your proposal? When will we see it? And given the fact that we have such a variety of prices when it comes to issues like mortgages, in my own country, standard variable rates are 4%, on average 2% higher on mortgages than they are in other Eurozone member states. What are you proposing to do about this, which is a key issue in terms of EU consumers and their rights to shop around and in order to save money on key financial services? Thank you, Commissioner.
Well, thank you for both those points. On your second one first, retail financial services. So I'm on track to publish a green paper next month, so December. I hope towards the beginning of December, in a couple of weeks' time. And what that is intended to do, rather like I did with the Capital Markets Union green paper, is to kick off a debate. I have tried to, I want to, and it's still got to get through college, but I want it to kick off the debate from exactly in the way that you say, from a consumer point of view. So instead of maybe doing a more traditional approach of a kind of institutional view, to try and think about financial services from the point of view of our fellow citizens who are using them, whether it's car insurance, whether it's mortgages, whether it's life insurance, a particular bee in my bonnet, the car hire market, where I think there is a lot that could be done to improve transparency around that. We've all had experiences with the car hire on our holidays. But to try and take a sort of practical approach and come up with ways of making improvements. Some of these, the reasons for these differences are to do with the historic nature of markets, legislation, so it isn't completely straightforward, but I think all the questions that you have raised should be in there, and that's what I want the Green Paper to look at, and then we'll use that feedback to come up with proposals to try and make progress. On TTIP, I agree with you strongly about the need to try to have a system of better a system better to define financial regulation, because it controls market access, and for the EU and the US not to be operating in a more joined-up way isn't massively intelligent. And I've had a long-running issue over CCPs and granting equivalence, precisely because we have different systems operating in parallel. I think it is important we continue to argue for it in TTIP. What we will end up with, not completely clear, because as you know, there is a whole end game to go through, but we argue for it strongly, precisely for the reasons that you give, I think we have to find a way of getting better cooperation on financial regulation. And so we'll continue to push for that in the talks of TTIP.
Thank you. Last